Okay, welcome everybody to the Aspen Reserve Upgrade Options Workshop of today, 28th of August. And so I think I'll just keep it quite simple and throw it straight over to you, Emily.
Thanks, Chair. Can you hear me all right? So thanks for having us back. We're here to bring the Aspen Reserve Upgrade Project back to you. The report was left lying on the table from the 7th of April CDC meeting. And this session is to provide you with an opportunity to discuss and agree on a scope for the upgrade consistent with the value for money approach, which was asked of us at the end of that meeting. We're really conscious of time. We only have 30 minutes with you. And we need to get you familiar with the site, check some assumptions in terms of the problems we're trying to solve, and get your feedback as we go, so we walk out of this room with some clear direction, hopefully. So that goes to a little bit of background and to the agenda today. We've got 4 things we need to get through. As I said, something that we heard back in April was what exactly are we trying to solve here? So we want to work you through some of those assumptions, and then we've got some key design moves that can help us put together a scope. So it would have been helpful to have met you on site, but again, we're pressed for time, so we have brought the site to you. So please enjoy a video to kick us off. Oh, hang on. That is Tana. Anahira. What about if I try this?
Hi guys, Tana here, our accessibility.
That's just from my computer, though.
Just here to talk about Aspen Reserve and what it means to our community, what can be done to make it better, more accessible and more inclusive. So when I was asked today to come down and check out Aspen Reserve, I had no idea where it was, and that's a concern. Considering I did an accessibility review of the city centre 2 years ago, I had no idea where this park was or what it was, and that's a result of conditioning. When we build our communities in a way that are inaccessible and uninclusive, we find areas like this where our disabled community will automatically black them out in their heads because that's clearly not a space that's made for me. It doesn't exist. It's not part of my world. So that in itself is a concern. So it's a beautiful space. We all deserve to have access to these spaces, and there is opportunity here to create that accessibility and inclusive space as well. I think with Willow being the level entry, the access route from our city centre through to our civic precinct, really important to make sure this is a focus for accessibility. This is going to be a new, larger courthouse for Tauranga, new courtrooms, larger spaces, which means more cases and ultimately more people. We already know that there are some issues with people congregating outside on the footpath on Cameron Road with the existing building, so we're trying to think of what will the future of Willow Street look like. A narrow footpath, and we're going to need to think of the space for people. The other idea is how do we occupy Aspen Reserve and allow this space to be used for people coming out on their lunch breaks or waiting for cases to begin. We think that this is nicely co-located, thinking about the new groups that will need to spend time here.
It would be good to have some shade in summer and then maybe some sun in winter, so yeah, we can come out and enjoy the sun when it's warm.
Yeah, actually a bench would be nice, because you can see I've used my knees.
Yeah.
One of the important things about this reserve is it's the only piece of untouched land in the city. So we've never seen a building on this piece of land. If you look down here, you've got a historic wall which has been here as long as the post office. And I believe that this area was used for the horses when the people were coming to the post office, so you had to tie your horse up somewhere, and so this bit of land was kind of left open because of that. If we go further over to the slope here, there used to be various events went on here, and people would sit around on this bank while down in the bottom corner there people could do, you know, to have some kind of artworks going on, have maybe a play, whatever.
let's go have a look at how we might get people across the road to Aspen Reserve and down into the space. What do we do here? How do we start to pull the people across and give them a space that they can enjoy in between cases or during lunch break? What we think here is pulling people into the reserve from Willow Street will allow them to see down from the courthouse and see that this is a place to stay. The other things we need to think about is landscape design, avoiding hidey spots for contraband. That was a key tidbit from the courthouse. And then also thinking about groups that may want to not sit together but be in the same space. So we want multiple seating areas for people to enjoy Aspen Reserve.
When we have a fifth team member, they're going to be sitting on the ground.
Well, we've had a few people approach us when we've been out here, and it's been a quick getaway when that's happened.
No, I wouldn't come out here by myself. Yeah, just, I don't know, you don't know what you get.
The Pohutukawa, of course, has got quite large now. It produces beautiful shade. It's a lovely tree when it flowers, but everything else has deteriorated. The planting you see down the bottom here is pretty much the remnants of the 1950s through to 70s, depending on what the time period is. One of the good news stories for this reserve, of course, is the fact that a new building is here and that people are now able to look down onto the reserve and make it, hopefully, have eyes on the reserve that will make it a little safer for anyone who comes in here.
That unknown, because as I was saying, you either have people sitting over there that, you know, and then you might have some people down there, at the back of the reserve.
Generally, we think that the locals are a little bit hesitant about using this space.
Especially if you're out here by yourself and you just want some fresh air, and you're by yourself, it's quite nerve-wracking.
Especially when we talk to the women, they tended to talk about homeless people, drunkenness, maybe a little bit of violence going on. So it's one of those things that I think we need to think about when it comes to spending some money and upgrading this space.
Okay, so now you've seen the state of the reserve. This is our first check-in point to check that we are on the right track in terms of the problems we're keen to solve here through an upgrade. So you'll see them on the screen there on the left, and they have a corresponding draft objective for the project. I guess for us, thinking of this as a workshop, doing something slightly different, this is the first check-in point to make sure that this is something we do want to spend some money to solve. And then we've got some key design moves or some suggestions in how we can create the scope based on an investment level. But over to you. Any questions or comments?
Just quickly on that, thanks for that. Initially, also just, I suppose, real clarity or what you're thinking around the vision for the space for the future of the city. So an event space, lunch space, multiple users. What else came out of it? I think that's for the elected members, probably when I'd ask them whether they agree or not, which hopefully they do, but real clarity around what you think this space is for the city, because it looks like it hasn't had much done to it for 50 years, so. What can it be? Is there problems?
That's a great point, and I think all of those things, I think from priority in terms of what we're looking to achieve, it would be the breakout space for people to enjoy on their lunch breaks. It would be to support the future demand of the courthouse. So again, either lunch breaks or waiting for cases to begin. And then probably secondary to that would be a future event space. The key interventions we want to show you have considered how multiple groups might use it. So for example, if we terrace the site, a workout group could use it or a play could be held there. But again, very conscious of the other investment going on in our other city centre spaces.
Any questions at this stage or carry on? All good?
Okay, so based on kind of a a general comfort to proceed, what do we then do? How do we build the scope? So because we wanted to include you in that process, in the kind of initiation design process, here we have some of the key design moves that we consider would meet those objectives, or help us meet those objectives. There are 5 elements we want to present to you that Anna will take you through, and just keep in mind that these can be stacked or combined together to create a scope, or we could reduce back down to kind of one or two. I just want to mention, and I know Anna will as well, that we have put some very high-level cost estimates to each of these elements. They are very high level, and in some cases are quite generous, just to make sure that we've kind of covered off any risk or contingency. Over to Anna.
Hi everybody, kia ora. I'm happy to be here. All right, so first of all, of the 5 areas we've identified, the first is providing access to McLean Street. When we discussed this report with the council in April, this was proposed as an option, adding in a concrete footpath and a couple of seats and removing the trees that make the area unsafe. The cost estimate here is very conservative, very generous. It would likely be much, much less than that, but it's just, there's archaeology nearby, so, you know, taking into account that if there was a fine, for example, that takes extra time and cost, and then other things like trying to get the levels right. When we were there with Taina, she was talking about the cross fall at the angle, and when you're in, for example, not a motorised wheelchair, but another kind, you can tip out, and just trying to get those levels right to get that accessible access in. So there's just a bit of figuring how to do that and tying in with the existing concrete. So this is the very basic. It would be most likely be a quarter of the maximum price that's shown here, but don't know for sure. So the second option is terracing the bank. There are many ways we could do that. We could start off with just doing some grass terraces, as you can see here, ranging to having timber retaining or having concrete elements so that actually you're not sitting on grass, but you're sitting on timber, or you're sitting on a concrete area. We could keep adding to that, for example, adding a couple of lounges. So the price range here really could go from less than 100 to 300. Varies widely because we don't have a design, so we can't cost it. So you can see some precedent images there. Out of interest, the top 2 images on the right, they're from 2 other amphitheatre places in town, Waitaha Reserve and the Historic Village. The one at Waitaha was completed around 50k with the timber. The Aspen area might be nearly twice that size, but whether we use timber or we just do grass, whatever. This focal point here, basically, the basic is having a footpath and a paved area, and then improving the landscaping there, but then the options include screening the car park, and you can't see it in this image, but there's like a wire fence from the reserve to the car park next door where the liquor store is, which isn't very attractive. Improving the fence, hedging, landscaping, putting in like a circular seat, and then that paved area could work as a stage in the future if there was an interest in events. There's a couple of precedent images there. And then moving on to the next one. So this idea, one of the issues with this reserve, because it's lower than the street, visibility into it and access into it is a little bit limited and is not very attractive. So an idea was to be able to step off the footpath onto a timber deck around the tree, and then that timber deck would then have, for example, steps and seating that you would be able to sit around. And in the precedent images on the next page, we had a couple of examples shown from a hope, which shows a timber deck. We're also thinking that lighting the tree could be a nice element. On the other side of the road, you've got the old post office, which is lit up really nicely at night, and put in some fairy lights or something like that in the tree across the road. And then the last one is, we think would be one of the best things that you could do in making quite a big difference to the reserve, and is getting in a ramped access, but really making sure that it's fully like universal. We can manage all the gradients and all of that. So it would require a bit of earthworks in comparison with the first option I showed you, which would be is pretty minimal, and we're not sure if we can get those accessible gradients to be met. And so this, yeah, it's ramps, seats, bit of landscaping, and picnic table or a bit of seating. So that was a very quick fly through, and I'm going to hand back to Emily.
Thanks, Anna. This is probably another good time to check in on what you've seen. I realise we're rapidly moving you through this.
Any questions? Hautapa?
Morena, questions. Have we had a conversation with the court about any potential contributions on their end?
We haven't had a direct conversation about contributions. I know that that's something that's attractive to councillors and is definitely in the back of our minds. At this stage, we don't have a project formed in a clear budget, so I feel like we're a step beyond that at this point. And I think that having some kind of clarity around the next steps in direction could allow that conversation to take place. I do know that they're well entrenched in their own development, including some of the landscaping and accessibility challenges they have coming out to Willow Street. So whether it's the right time to ask for a contribution to this project, I think is still to be seen, but we can certainly make the approach.
I guess the thinking is with how, you've anchored, so when listening to the video, great video by the way, you've anchored so much of the rationale was anchored more towards the court and activities in and around the court. I would think that should they be keen or should we progress this thing, that there might be just opportunity to view both these two projects as one. To me, it does seem timely to have those conversations if they're considering access from their site to the rest of the city. Just as one point, but do we actually have any examples similar in nature where improving visibility and landscape actually reduces antisocial behaviour?
I probably couldn't point to any specific example, but we do know in looking at crime prevention through design, CPTED outcomes, it's about making a space attractive for the right types of behaviour. And so if there is more people spending time having the right behaviour in a space, it means that it's less attractive for the antisocial behaviour to occur in the first place. So particularly with things like considering after-hours lighting for the Purakawa tree, if that tree was lit and people were choosing to spend time in Aspen Reserve after hours, it would make it less attractive for people to do other less desirable things.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
Could I also just mention, I think the important thing is it is very much about the new courthouse, and that was clear in terms of where the City Centre Action Investment Plan saw this reserve fitting with that project. But I think we're seeing the broader growth of that area being both the Justice Precinct and connecting into Te Manawataki o Te Papa. So with that new building right next door, you have multiple businesses there looking to occupy the space.
Councillor Crowther?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, on the side there. And thank you, Emily and Anna. I guess not so much question, just sort of comment, my feedback that you've sort of asked for. I think for me, the top priorities would be the accessibility and the history around there. And so I could sort of see, that there could be maybe a bit too much money needing to go for full universal access to get from both streets. But if there was some disability access there, I think that'd be a huge improvement, and that'd be a big priority for me. I'm not so convinced about the terraces. I actually recall back in the day when it was used more, that kids used to love just running around there, and to actually have areas for people to sit under in shade and in sun. I think those little snippets you showed were quite right on the mark, actually, that we need both. We need the sort of winter and the summer scenarios, and I don't think that has to be prohibitive cost-wise, but I think the terraces would be far better to be, like a potential later stage of this project, but it may be that people don't even want them, and it may be that it's utilised well without the terraces. But if for some reason it's not activated well and we need them, that could always come later, in my view. And I would say, in terms of the sort of the lower focal area and mural or whatever piece of art, I would think the appropriate approach, given conversations I've had with people around the city in terms of wanting artwork in their areas, would be to go through the Public Art Fund, because my understanding is that's what it's there for, is to look at which areas of the city should be prioritised with which types of art, and that could enhance this. But I think in terms of the core project, for me, it'd be the disability access and the history. And the last thing I'd say is the feedback I've had from people around there is that it is less unsafe, if I put it that way, than it was a while ago, as mentioned in the video with the building and some other changes that have happened.
Thanks, Councillor Crowther. And tangata whenua, Jackie Rolleston-Steed, your hands up.
Kia ora. Heaps to say, but in the interest of time, I'm going to try and elevator pitch this as best as I can. I think the images look amazing. One thing I haven't noticed in the brief, and something that was touched on in the paper earlier this year when it was presented, was around the engagement that's already been had with the 3 hapu since 2017. And what they were hoping to have included, like cultural po on Aspen Reserve and stuff as well, given its proximity to other areas of cultural significance. And what I thought was interesting is also that you've introduced something that I didn't consider before, and that's its close proximity to the Justice Precinct. And when we think about our current demographic, approximately 50% of defendants in the criminal jurisdiction, they're predominantly male youth, Māori male. So I think being able to ensure that there is still those cultural elements that are incorporated isn't just a nice to have, but would be a necessary design principle for, for those coming into that space to connect with, to feel toe. As well as honouring the previous engagement that's been had with hapu. So I'll just wrap it up there. Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. Councillor Rolleston.
Thank you, Chair. Probably semi-related to what Jackie Rolleston had. The Tauranga Moana Trust Board is, we talk around the courthouse and then we talk around the Aspen Reserve, and then just as we drop down, you've got the Tauranga Moana Trust Board and I guess a little precinct down there, and of course there's the Waka shelter down there. I might be going over old ground because I'm sort of just picking this up now, but has that been, I guess, coordinated into the thinking? Because you talked earlier around Te Manawataki or Te Papa and what the whole, where this fits in. Has there been conversations of what might be going to happen down there in the near future and how this integrates and supports some of that thinking?
You can see my colleagues conferring in the background. I believe we spoke to them, so we'll have some specific feedback on that, which we can draw out. I think what I'm hearing you say, though, is probably more a precinct plan in terms of how that lower strand, that northern strand and this reserve operates with the Justice Precinct and then into the Historical Precinct. So we do have a little piece of very high level work around how we imagine those spaces will connect into the city centre in particular to encourage that. But again, very high level at this point and needs multiple conversations. I think both yours and Jackie's points are great if we're able to take this to the next stage, that could be a real focus for how that reserve could operate as an intermediary space.
Thanks, Hebe. And bearing in mind, I think the whariwaka is due to move as well, isn't it, to the south? Just a quick one from me. Is there a question here? I'll go first, then you can go, since I'm allowed to boss you around today. Just the event space and the family concept, and obviously the judicial precinct is a weekdays 9 to 5 thing, and then you talked about the safety elements around the evening stuff. I suppose one thing that I could see that area and being a place for families for outdoor movies, a free movie or something in the evenings, that then they could go down and go to the Strand and, sorry, Councillor Taylor, go down to the Strand and have dinner. So, you know, that to me, the other, you know, something that can be used, you know, right through the day and in the evenings in summer, I think would, yeah, be something that I'd like to see as part of that end vision and focus as well. Has that been thought of? Is that sort of part of the thinking around potentially like you talked about a stage down the bottom, but if we could make sure that in the planning that there was capacity for a screen or space or something, would be great for families in the evening, I would have thought.
It has been, did you want me to respond?
No, yeah, well,
Only that it has been considered, and as I said, I think what we're waiting to see is how the civic plaza of Te Manawataki o Te Papa will form in terms of the amphitheatres or the terraces that might be created within that space. And obviously we do offer outdoor movies on the waterfront. So we are seeing at this stage, this reserve is prioritised for some of those other more passive reserve activities, but that's not to say that this wouldn't create future opportunities for Shakespeare or others.
no, it's great that it's part of the overall planning.
Thank you, Chair. Mine's around, I definitely favour it being more open and accessible, but I definitely favour it be having more seating, people stop for lunch, rest, because it's on the path to everywhere else. Being between the Justin precinct and downtown, people are going to be walking through there, so we need to be mindful of the demographic of Tauranga and aged, that they got somewhere to pause and rest, and just sit and admire the scenery while they walk and transition around. So having more seating, open it up, make it more accessible to all of Tauranga people to stop and rest. And so around the terracing, not quite so keen for the reasons Glenn Crowther's already stated. Councillors around kids just being able to run around there and have a good time, and definitely supportive of improving the lighting. So in the shoulders, early morning, evenings, to remove the risk of trips and falls. If everyone can see where they're going, it's going to remove all of that. That's my input.
Do we let him speak? Yes. To you.
Yeah, like I think, you know, keep it fairly simple. I think, you know, something like one is quite a nice way of allowing some accessibility to the site. You know, from a pretty simple perspective. You know, opening it up, keeping the grass area, I think, is great. You know, if we can look at you know, if you put a mural on the wall and planted a few hedge plants along the fence, I think you'd go a long way to you know, making it a lot more beautiful and usable. And you know, yeah, I think we've heard around having some options for seating as well within the park. But I think we keep it pretty simple, tidy up all that frontage along Willow Street. You know, take out those trees, make a focal point of that Pahutakawa. You know, that obviously also gives you some natural shade as well, which is nice. So I think just nice and simple, but making it usable, keeping that grass is a good thing.
So perhaps this is a good time to land, very conscious of time, but to land on this idea around investment options. So as I said at the beginning, we imagined that depending on your feedback on each of those key interventions, we could combine them or stack them in various iterations. As we've already indicated, the cost estimates on the right-hand side are very generous. And for example, if we landed in the middle line, for example, and took out the terraces, we'd be dropping that price down by, you know, between 150 and 300k pretty quickly. So we feel, I think if we can have feedback on the problem statements on those key objectives, we've now heard about which intervention sounds about right. If there's any feedback on level of investment, we can then move forward in terms of drawing up a concept design, which we can start getting much clearer around costings to bring that back for a final decision.
That's great, and obviously the way I'm assuming the way you've got these, that they all work effectively as a potentially a structured element too as well, because so it could be sequenced. So the design looks very much like you've factored in everything alongside each other. So For example, if terracing wasn't there for the initial part, but we did 3 and 5, for example, or did 3, 4 and 5, so that is also saying that could be a live project going over a slightly longer time frame to deliver the outcome as well. Any further questions? Councillor Kurak? Just your hands up. Feedback. Good, way you go.
So, yeah, I'm with Mahe in terms of where I'm at the stage. Just doing one, access from McLean Street, to me, provides, what is urgently required. And then later on, as we enter into our 10-year plan review, we could look at what this community is facing in terms of affordability, because we always need to keep that in mind given what's coming in the future. And what year is the Justice Precinct complete? 2028, is it? Yep, 2028. Okay. And then we can see in terms of demand, because obviously the demand is going to grow a lot, the spill out from that. So, yep, a stepped approach, I'm supportive of locking in one, and then moving through the 10-year plan to look at further work. That's my direction.
I think just going back to that budget, I understand you say this is very generous, but, we should be able to put a mural on that wall, plant a hedge, do that little concrete path, put in a whole lot of seating. That should be a 40 to 50,000 job, not 150 to 200,000 job. And I think that's really the key from here. Like, let's not go to a designer to go and design this. We should be capable of doing that in-house. Let's not go and pay 30 grand in fees to get to a concept design, because that's where we're already, again, let's look at the price of concrete, let's look at the price of what a table and chairs costs, and get it as close to the cost as we possibly can. We've got City Ops that can install, chairs and tables, and we've got, a concrete path like that is 5-6 grand, in cost, and obviously a little bit of earthworks around that. But it's just really important that we don't use that as a target. We actually use the cost of these things as a target, and knowing what concrete costs, how big an area are we doing, what's it cost to have a concrete placed. It's pretty easy to come up with what it should cost. And the numbers here, and I accept you've already said they're way out of scope, but they are way out of scope. And just make sure we do that in coming back, because I think we can deliver something pretty awesome for 50 grand, not 150 grand. So
I might just jump in there, Emily. So because you've got a couple other slides you probably want to show, just showing how it all goes together. But also to councillors, so we're agreed on the problems that we're trying to solve, and then let's just get clarity around the vision and the envision, and if there's discussions or feedback around the relative cost or the absolute cost, I totally get what the mayor is saying, but they've come to us today with a proposal. So if you can just scroll through to those next couple of pages, they're there now. So that there you can see could be what it would look like if everything was done over time. And I think this is so I think, part of us and our feedback too, are we in agreement with the overall concept of development and what it would look like? And then obviously there's always going to be a clear remit or a clear expectation of do this for as much value for money as possible. But I think the feedback today is the concepts that have been presented to us, are they? I personally would. I'd put my hand up. I think you've done a great job. So I'm fully supportive, but we'll respect other councillors' views on timing and the various priorities. I think we should prioritise if we could and give them some real clear feedback.
Sorry, I should have asked this earlier. Just something was mentioned earlier on about the little stone wall. Historic, is that going to stay, or is that, so if you did the deck around the Pahutakawa, for example, would that wall disappear?
That would need to be worked out, but the plan here, as you can see, very quick design work here, would retain the stone wall around where the Nikos are on that key corner there, but in some places we would look to remove the wall. It provides that real accessibility challenge from Willow Street.
Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Councillor Schuller. No, we spoke about the terracing before, but the earlier comment at the beginning of the meeting around one of the only untouched pieces of the Te Papa Peninsula kind of resonated with me a little bit. So a light touch in terms of the landscaping there, I think, would be, from an historical perspective, be good.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I endorse pretty much what's been said. I think there's still some things to happen, and maybe the light touch gives that opportunity to, I guess, to determine the bigger direction of travel. So as we talked around the court, but I think down in the precinct down where the trust board is, I think there may be something happen, hopefully, or in the next while. So it gives that flexibility, because it's a bit of a jigsaw puzzle happening, if I so to speak. There's a whole lot of pieces that are still evolving. Obviously, there's big pieces down in the main Te Manawataki, and then there's the areas around there with the Justice Precinct and where the trust board is and some of these other parts. So I think doing as much as required under the sort of light touch with the flexibility to grow. So I think always keeping that opportunity to move with the need as required. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Crowther?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the sort of light touch, what Councillor Morris said around sort of an untouched area. I mean, that resonates with me as well. And to Councillor Taylor's point, I feel uncomfortable about the idea of losing so much of that stone wall. To me, it may not seem like much, but we don't have much visible sort of history in the area. Like there is a lot of history, and there are a lot of stories that can go with it, and council can do all sorts of things to enhance the historical precinct. But, to me, things like that are still special and complement what Jackie had said in terms of having Māori history recognised there. And I think that is more of a priority. And speaking as someone who has had experience with people with disabilities, that, I think we run the risk of putting accessibility almost ahead of the history of it in a way that's not needed, because I think you would find that to go from having no access to there to having quite good access off McLean Street would be perfectly acceptable to most people in order to retain historical features. And it would attract many people to the park if we enhanced it. So if we did the opposite of what council did down at Masonic Park, which is sort of cover up some of the history there, if we actually made it a feature, to me that would be far better, and it would tie into linking through from Te Manawataki o Te Papa through to the Elms and through to Otamataha, and you would have a cultural and historic trail that would all be linked in it. So I guess I feel very strongly about that, and it'd be my number one priority for here. And yeah, I'd just like to think go very light touch, and obviously the mayor and others have said as cheap as possible.
Yeah, look, thanks, Councillor Crowther. We have probably done our time. What I think, there's obviously a bit of feedback here in terms of that light touch. What we'll do, we do have some mayor councillor time this afternoon, so if the mayor is happy with that, we might get a bit of a official group response back to you by the end of the day. Is that all right? In terms of the feedback.
Great,
'cause
thank you.
that'd be-
Otherwise, I feel like we've got
Yeah.
a direction.
Good.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, so support that. I'm probably more for moderate, but we'll get a response back officially. Just on the way that you guys presented it, great. In terms of the visuals, considering we couldn't get to the site, the video, all of that actually really helped. And this was by far probably, at least for me, one of the better ways that we've had information presented to us. So that's just a point of feedback for you guys. Great job, but also for the wider organisation. And my hope is that the video thing wasn't too... if that's a cost-effective way, it'll be a great way to continue to feed us information like that. It was awesome.
Thanks, Councillor Taylor. And with that, we will... no, not you, Councillor Baker. No, we sort of want to close up and move on. We've got another...
As this is an open session, I think it's important to hear back from the staff. What is your understanding of our current position? Is it, to me, I've heard it's just doing number one, but and I support Councillor Crow though in terms of retaining the stone walling. Is that? Could you confirm what you've heard to date, or so far at the session?
Yes. So the memorable feedback that's landing with me is the light touch. Is the so it is. So what I've heard is that you agree with the problem statements and the key objectives. So what is the lightest touch that we can achieve on that? I think the outstanding piece of feedback is when this comes back to you for a decision, would you still like to see a range? So would we show number 1 and number 5 as those two options for providing accessibility, keeping in mind the importance of the historic wall? So that could be an option, or do you only want to see one option back to the chambers?
All right, thanks very much, everyone. We'll